Hello, students! Let's settle in and begin our revision for the geography chapter, Water Resources. We're going to go through everything nice and slow, step by step, to make sure you feel really confident for your exams. Shall we start?
All right, so let's begin. You might remember this little conversation from the start of your textbook. It seems simple, doesn't it? But it actually sets up the whole chapter beautifully. Think about it. Water can give life, but it can also take life away, like in floods. It's needed for absolutely everything we do, at home for cooking and drinking, and even in big factories to run the machines. This idea, this dual nature of water, is really the core theme we'll be exploring.
Now, I know you've studied this before, but it's always good to revise the basics. We all learned that water is a renewable resource, right? And that's because of the hydrological cycle, which is always at work. Evaporation, condensation, and then precipitation as rain. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. Even though about 3/4 of our planet is covered in water, most of it is salty ocean water. The amount of fresh water that we can actually use is, well, it's incredibly small.
Okay, so that leads us to the most important question in this chapter. Let's move on to understanding water scarcity.
So here's the puzzle. If water is renewable, why on earth do we face water scarcity? When we hear that phrase, our minds immediately jump to places with very little rain, like the deserts of Rajasthan. But the reality is, it's much, much more complicated than just that. It's not always about a lack of rain.
And these two pictures show this perfectly. Just look. On the left, you have a street that's completely flooded. There's water everywhere. But can you drink it? Of course not. On the right, you see people waiting in a long line just for a little bit of water. This helps us understand that there are two kinds of water scarcity. The first is quantitative scarcity. That means there's just not enough water. The second is qualitative scarcity, where there might be a lot of water, but its quality is so bad, maybe it's polluted, that we can't use it.
So what's causing all this, especially here in India? Well, let's go through the main reasons. First, we have a large and growing population, which naturally means we need more water for everyone. Second, think about our farms. Agriculture needs a huge amount of water, and to get it, we often overuse groundwater with wells and tube wells. Then, of course, there's industrialization and our growing cities. They not only consume a lot of water, but also pollute the water sources with waste. So, you see, the big takeaway here is that water scarcity is very often a problem of bad management. It's a man-made issue.
All right, so with this huge challenge of water scarcity, what did India decide to do after independence? The big idea was to build large, multi-purpose river projects, or as we all know them, dams.
Jawaharlal Nehru, our first prime minister, proudly called dams the temples of modern India. Now, why such a grand title? Well, because at that time, these huge structures were seen as a symbol of progress. The hope was that they would be the key to solving India's water problems, generating electricity, and really driving the country forward.
And they were called multi-purpose for a very good reason. They were designed to do many, many jobs all at the same time. Let's see. They provided water for irrigation for our farms, they generated electricity, they supplied water for homes and industries in the cities, they helped control floods, and even created opportunities for things like fishing and boating. A perfect example of this is the Brakra Nangal project.
But over time, people started to question this idea. Are big dams really the perfect solution? And this is very important for your exams, children. To get good marks, you must always present a balanced view. So let's look at the problems with dams.
This table here is a fantastic way to structure your answer for an exam. You should always talk about both the advantages and the disadvantages. So on one side, we have all the good things we just talked about: irrigation, electricity, flood control. But on the other side, well, building a dam completely changes the natural flow of a river. It can destroy the homes of fish and other aquatic animals. It forces large numbers of people to leave their homes, and it can even damage the soil.
Let's dig a little deeper into these problems. You see, when a river's flow is stopped, all the silt and sediment it was carrying just settles at the bottom of the dam's reservoir. This is bad for the aquatic life. Also, the huge lake that forms behind the dam, the reservoir, ends up flooding and destroying huge areas of forest and farmland. But perhaps the most serious impact is the social one. Think about the local communities, the tribal people who have lived there for generations. They are forced to leave their homes and find new livelihoods. It's a huge human cost.
And it doesn't stop there. Another big issue is conflict between states. You see, a river doesn't care about state borders, it just flows. So if one state builds a dam, it can control how much water flows to the next state downstream. This, as you can imagine, leads to a lot of arguments. A well-known example is the Krishna-Godavari dispute, which involved objections between Maharashtra, Karnataka, and Andhra Pradesh over sharing the river's water.
So, with all these problems surrounding big dams, people started looking for other solutions, and many of these alternatives are not new at all. They are based on our country's ancient traditions of saving water. These methods are smaller, more local, and this brings us to our next important topic: rainwater harvesting.
You know, India has an amazing history of clever water harvesting techniques, each one perfectly suited to its local environment. For example, up in the Himalayas, people built these channels called guls or kools to bring water from streams to their fields. And over in Meghalaya, they have this incredible 200-year-old system that uses bamboo pipes to drip water onto plants. Just brilliant, aren't they? And so good for the environment.
So the question is, how can we use this traditional wisdom in our modern lives? Well, one of the simplest and most effective methods is rooftop rainwater harvesting. The concept is really very simple. You just collect the rainwater that falls on your roof instead of letting it run away. Let's look at how it works.
Okay, let's follow the journey of a raindrop here. First, it falls on the roof. From the roof, it flows into a pipe. Before it gets stored, it passes through a simple filter, maybe with some sand and bricks, to clean out any dirt. Then, the clean water is stored in an underground tank or a sump, ready for you to use. And if there's any extra water, it's sent down into a well to help recharge the groundwater. See? It's simple, it's local, and it works.
And please remember, this is not just an idea in a textbook. It's really happening. And here is a very important fact for your exam. Do you know which state was the first in India to make rooftop rainwater harvesting compulsory for all houses? It's Tamil Nadu, a great example of a state taking sustainable water management seriously.
All right, we've revised all the main concepts of the chapter now. To finish up, let's go over some specific tips and tricks that will really help you score well in your exam.
First things first, definitions. You will very likely be asked to define what a multi-purpose project is, so learn this definition by heart. Make sure you clearly mention that it's a single project, usually a dam, that serves many purposes at the same time, like irrigation and power generation.
Secondly, diagrams and maps. This is very, very important. You must practice drawing the rooftop rainwater harvesting system and labeling all its parts correctly. And for your map work, you should be able to locate the major dams like Bhakranangal, Hirakud, and Sardar Sarovar on a map of India. These are very frequently asked.
And finally, a few common mistakes to avoid. Please be careful not to mix up quantitative and qualitative water scarcity. Also, when you get a question on dams, please always write about both the advantages and the disadvantages. A one-sided answer will lose you marks. And one last tip, always use examples. Mentioning Gindathar village or Palarpani from Rajasthan, these small details show the examiner you know your subject well.
So, as we finish our revision, I want to leave you with one final question to think about. It really captures the main debate of this chapter. For the future of India's water security, what do you think is better? Building more huge dams or encouraging millions of small, local rainwater harvesting systems? There's no easy answer, just something to think about. That's all for today's session. I wish you all the very best for your exam.